Design thinking is a term that refers to the reasoning that designers use when engaging with design problems. And we're all designers at some time or another. We're designing when we come up with an idea for something that doesn't exist in order to address a perceived problem. We're still designing when we find a way to represent those ideas and when we iterate over this cycle again and again. There are many design professions that you're probably familiar with. Architects design houses, web designers design websites, yet everybody designs, even if they're not a professional designer. Think of all the things that you do that involve design. Perhaps designing a layout for your bedroom, or designing a playlist for your weekend at the beach with friends. Design thinking, then, is about learning from studies of expert designers so that we ourselves can become better at designing. The key thing that you need to know about design thinking is that any design activity requires us to go through cycles of creating and learning. Now, we create by coming up with concepts that address the design problem, perhaps by sketching potential solutions, writing down possibilities, or coming up with ideas in the comfort of our heads. We learn by reflecting on our design moves and by taking actions to learn more about the world of the design problem. Often, that leads us back to more creating. So, how then does a designer know what they need to create when they start addressing a particular problem? And how do they know what they need to learn when facing a new and unfamiliar problem? The answer to those questions is precisely the nature of design expertise. When faced with a design problem, designers develop skill to know which ways of working are likely to be productive. They also have a sense of what they will need to learn and how they might go about learning it. There are two models of design thinking that you may be familiar with, as they've become quite popular. One is the British Design Council's Double Diamond, and the other is the IDEO design thinking approach. Models like these two are useful as a kind of crutch for people who haven't yet developed expertise in design thinking. They provide some guidance into things that you might need to create and things that you might need to learn. When we study design thinking, though, we aim to go well beyond these models. We've learned a lot about design thinking over decades of design research, about ways of creating and learning that tend to be productive for certain kinds of problem. And some of this knowledge is captured in patterns that we call design methods. It's also helpful for you to develop a language for talking about the way that you think when you're designing. So the first term that we'll address is that any designer has a frame for the problem that they're addressing. Design problems are not somewhere out there waiting to be addressed. Rather, the designer creates their own understanding of what the design problem is about. And this process of creating that understanding is called design framing. It is something we'll talk more about as the core of design thinking. As a design student, some things that you can begin to do are to notice three things. Firstly, I'd like you to notice when you're designing in your daily life. Second thing is, while you're designing, begin to ask yourself, what problem am I solving right now? How do I conceive of this problem that I'm addressing? And finally, what could I be doing to learn more about the world of this design problem? Through these steps, you'll become a reflective designer. And as a reflective designer, you won't be able to help but develop your skills in design thinking.